My name is Ashley Reed, and I am 41 years old. The day my older sister announced to an entire wedding reception that I was a city janitor was the very same day I put one of Texas's most wanted criminals behind bars for good. Sometimes, life really does have a twisted sense of humor. My morning started the same as any other in my line of work. Coffee brewed strong at 4:30 a.m., the comforting weight of my badge on the table, and a folder full of crime scene photos spread across my tiny kitchen in Fort Worth. While the city still slept, I was already reviewing the case files for what felt like the 1000th time, my service pistol resting on the counter like a silent partner. Every detail mattered when you were preparing for a day like this. The Melvinson case had consumed almost 18 months of my life. 18 months of sleepless nights and leads that went nowhere. 18 months of watching families bury their daughters while a predator slipped through cracks in the system. When I say I carried the weight of those girls with me, I mean it. I could feel it in my bones each morning, in the way I checked every shadow as I left my apartment, in how I triple-checked every detail before stepping into court. Today, at last, would see justice. The courthouse in downtown New Orleans will be packed with reporters, lawyers, survivors, and families, each of them hoping for closure. My job was to make sure they got it. But before I could face the judge, the DA, and Melvinson himself, I had to put on a brave face for my family. Namely, for the spectacle that was my nephew's wedding. Ironic, right? Celebrating a new beginning when all you can think about is putting an end to someone's reign of terror. I could have skipped the wedding, told Madison I had urgent business back in Dallas, but she would never let me live it down. Family comes first, Ashley, as she'd said, her voice oozing that brand of concern that feels more like judgment than love. It's not like the courthouse will fall apart if their janitor disappears for a night. Courthouse janitor. She loved introducing me that way. Madison always knew exactly what to say to put me in my place, even after all these years. It wasn't that she was ignorant of my real job, quite the opposite. My sister is the type of person who uses words as weapons. When she called me a janitor, she wasn't trying to shield me from the harshness of police work. She was reminding everyone, including me, that I would never measure up to her. Not in her eyes, anyway. Growing up, Madison was the golden child. She was the valedictorian, the soccer star, the kid who got a full ride to Stanford and never let any of us forget it. I was the one who scraped by in high school, who skipped prom to work night shifts at the diner, who chose a badge over a college diploma. And I never regretted it. Not once. Except maybe on days like this, when the world felt stacked against me from the start. Madison had her own law firm in San Diego before she turned 30. She lived in a glass high-rise and drove a Tesla. Meanwhile, I spent most of my 20s rotating between patrol shifts and therapy, dealing with the fallout of everything I'd seen on the streets: murders, overdoses, domestic disputes that ended in tragedy. The city could chew you up if you let it, and there were plenty of nights I thought it had swallowed me whole. At family holidays, Madison would talk about her court victories and her charity board positions, while Mom bragged about her perfect grandchildren and Dad poured another glass of bourbon. Ashley's doing municipal work, and Madison would chime in, making it sound as bland as possible. No mention of the sting operations, the undercover nights, the times I'd held a mother's hand while she wept for her daughter. Just janitorial, menial, invisible. 12 years ago, I overheard her telling my parents, Ashley's just broken now. She'll never amount to anything. I still remember standing outside the living room, clutching a cup of coffee, feeling like a stranger in my own skin. 3 months later, I applied to join the Special Crimes Task Force. And today, after all that, here I was, 41 years old. The so-called family disappointment, and the only person in that ballroom who had seen the world at its absolute worst and still chosen to fight for something better. The wedding reception was the stuff of Texas high society, towering ice sculptures, tables groaning under the weight of lobster and filet mignon, crystal glasses clinking in every corner. Madison floated around the room in a shimmering silver gown, a queen surveying her kingdom. I arrived in my best black dress, hair slicked back into a low ponytail, face clean of makeup except for a hint of eyeliner. I'd spent so many years perfecting the art of blending in, it almost felt strange to stand out. As soon as I walked in, Madison's voice rang out clear as a bell. "Oh, look, everyone, my little sister's finally here. The city's finest janitor, right out of Fort Worth." Her friends, attorneys, surgeons, a handful of venture capitalists, laughed politely, not quite sure if it was a joke or an insult. I just smiled, nodded to the bartender, and tried to remind myself that in 12 hours, none of this would matter. I had work to do. Real work. But in families like ours, old wounds never really heal. They just hide beneath the surface, waiting for someone like Madison to tear them open again. I kept to the edge of the ballroom, sipping ginger ale instead of champagne, surveying the glittering crowd as if it were a crime scene. Old habits die hard. Every detail registered: who stood together, who avoided eye contact, who seemed uncomfortable in their own skin. The life of a detective never fully switched off, even at a family event that was supposed to be about love. The wedding had all the trappings of Madison's taste: tall centerpieces of imported orchids, a live jazz band flown in from New York, and a dessert bar with at least 5 types of cake. The air hummed with conversations about stock portfolios, vacation homes in Aspen, the latest breakthroughs in corporate lore. I felt like I was moving through someone else's dream, one I had no interest in inheriting. Madison spotted me across the room, her expression sharpening as if she'd just noticed a stain on her otherwise perfect evening. She was holding court near the open bar, surrounded by a circle of well-dressed friends and her new in-laws. As I approached, their laughter quieted, replaced by the polite curiosity of people eager for gossip. "Everyone, this is my sister Ashley," a Madison declared with a flourish, her voice pitched loud enough for the waitstaff to hear. "She works for the city." She let the words hang, as if they were a punchline. A woman in a blue dress with perfectly sculpted brows smiled at me with cool indifference. "Oh, municipal work. What do you do, exactly?" Before I could answer, Madison cut in, flashing that practiced smile. "Oh, you know, she keeps the courthouse running, basic maintenance, a bit of security. Honestly, the city would fall apart without her." There it was again, the suggestion that I was little more than a glorified janitor, pushing a mop and scanning IDs at the front entrance. What none of them knew, what Madison never bothered to mention, was that I was the lead investigator on the most high-profile murder case in Texas that year. That I'd spent 18 months piecing together evidence, tracing Melvinson's movements across 3 states, sitting through interviews with grieving parents and terrified survivors. And today, I was waiting on a jury verdict that would determine whether a serial predator would spend the rest of his life behind bars, or whether the families would go home empty-handed yet again. I could have told them all that. I could have pulled out my badge and watched Madison's world tilt on its axis. But I just smiled, thanked them for their concern, and quietly excused myself. Let them believe what they wanted. I'd long ago realized that arguing with Madison in public was like wrestling a pig. You both get dirty, and the pig likes it. 2 more hours, I told myself. Make it through dinner, say congratulations to the bride and groom, then slip out before anyone could notice. But Madison was never one to let things go. Halfway through the meal, she rose to give her maid of honor speech. The string quartet quieted as she tapped her glass for attention. She began with glowing praise for her new sister-in-law, painting her as the epitome of ambition and achievement. Sarah is everything our family values: determination, success, relentless drive. She reminds me that if you work hard enough, you can accomplish anything. Her eyes drifted across the room, settling on me with surgical precision. Unlike some people who, well, are content with a simpler path. The room stiffened. I watched as cousins shifted uncomfortably in their chairs, as Madison's words settled over the crowd like a slow fog. But she wasn't finished. When Sarah told me she wanted to be a district attorney, I thought about my own little sister, who always had potential but, well, you know. Some folks just settle for less. It's tragic, really. I felt the old ache in my chest, the familiar cocktail of anger and embarrassment. But I kept my face neutral, my hands folded in my lap. I'd been in rooms with murderers who tried to stare me down, and Madison's digs were nothing compared to that. Then Madison raised her champagne flute and, with theatrical flair, gestured in my direction. But let's toast to those who try, and those who, bless their hearts, accept what life gives them. Some of us clean up the city in our own way. She smiled sweetly as the guests dutifully raised their glasses, unsure whether to laugh or look away. I wondered what Madison would do if she knew that just outside the ballroom, a courthouse full of reporters was waiting for my verdict. That in a few hours, my name would be on every news channel in Texas. But I didn't say a word. There was a strange power in silence, in holding back what you knew while everyone else made assumptions. I glanced at my phone, heart racing. No new messages. Not yet. The hardest part of this job was the waiting, the endless hours between evidence and justice, between heartbreak and resolution. Tonight, that feeling pressed heavier than ever. I watched my family, my father in his tux, pretending not to notice the tension, my mother whispering worriedly to an aunt about the seating chart, and my nephew, beaming with youthful optimism, untouched by all these unspoken resentments. Maybe, I thought, that was the only real difference between Madison and me. She needed everyone to know her version of the story. I was content to let the facts speak for themselves. Outside, the Texas sky had turned the color of polished steel, heavy with the threat of rain. I stood and made my way to the balcony, needing a breath of cool air before the next act began. Down below, the city lights of Dallas glimmered, alive, imperfect, endlessly moving forward. And somewhere out there, a jury was about to decide the end of a story that had haunted me for nearly 2 years. Leaning against the stone railing, I let my breath fog in the chilly night air. The reception's muffled laughter and clinking glasses faded behind me, replaced by the distant hum of city traffic and the wind carrying the scent of rain. Dallas always felt different at night, less judgmental, less weighed down by expectations. I sometimes wondered if I'd have made the same choices if I'd grown up anywhere else. For a moment, I let myself slip into memories, the early days on patrol, the adrenaline of chasing suspects down darkened alleys, the pride and terror of pinning on that badge for the first time. It hadn't been easy. The department was tough on rookies, tougher still on women. But I'd survived. I'd learned how to read a room, how to blend in, and, most importantly, how to stand my ground. That resilience had saved my life more than once. It had also isolated me from most of my family. Madison never understood why I chose this path. I think part of her believed I'd eventually outgrow a policing and do something more respectable. Maybe finish college, become a paralegal in her firm, buy a condo, get married. But there's something about seeing justice done, about holding the worst of humanity accountable, that gets into your blood. It changes you, sometimes in ways you can't explain to people who haven't walked those streets. I watched the rain begin to fall in silver sheets, the lights of downtown blurring in the wet. My phone buzzed in my purse, a sharp, insistent vibration that cut through the night. For a moment, I thought it might be the courthouse, the verdict finally in. Instead, it was a text from my partner, Deputy Jackson Rivera. Almost time. Jury's back. Verdict soon. TV crews everywhere. You ready? Ready? I almost laughed. I'd been preparing for this day for a year and a half, but the truth was, you never really feel ready for justice, not when it's this personal. Still, I typed back, always. Inside, dinner was ending and people were beginning to move toward the dance floor. Madison's daughter, a flower girl in a white tulle dress, ran past, chasing a cousin. I caught her eye and she grinned, waving as if I were someone important. Maybe, for her, I was. I hoped so. Kids deserve at least one adult who isn't afraid of speaking the truth. When I returned to the ballroom, I could feel eyes on me. Some relatives looked away, embarrassed by Madison's public performance. Others just seemed curious, as if I might suddenly confirm or deny the rumors about my job. I gave them nothing. Sometimes, dignity is the best armor. Madison, though, couldn't leave well enough alone. She glided over, holding her wine glass like a trophy, and lowered her voice to a whisper. Ashley, try not to make a scene when you leave. This is a family event. Let's just get through it, okay? I looked at her, really looked, and saw something new, a flicker of anxiety beneath her carefully painted face. Was it possible she felt threatened by me, after all these years? The thought gave me a strange, quiet strength. Don't worry, Maddie. I never wanted to steal your spotlight, I replied gently. She frowned, not quite sure how to interpret that, then turned on her heel and vanished into a knot of well-wishers. My phone buzzed again. 10 minutes. DA's calling press conference. Meteor wants you there. This time, I felt my pulse quicken. I slipped out of the ballroom, heading for the coat check, my mind replaying every detail of the Melvinson case. There had been nights I thought would never catch him. A predator that clever, that careful, it seemed like every time we got close, he slipped away, leaving behind heartbreak and frustration. But we'd persisted. We'd tracked the smallest evidence, followed cold trails across county lines, built a case the DA said was ironclad. It had cost me nearly everything: relationships, sleep, my own sense of safety. But if the jury did what we hoped, maybe it would all mean something. As I stepped out into the rain, my phone rang. This time, it was my mother. I almost didn't answer, but old habits die hard. Ashley? Honey, are you leaving already? I have to, Mom. Duty calls. A pause. Will you be all right? Madison's speech was, well, I'm sorry. She shouldn't have said those things. It's fine, Mom. Really? I've been through worse. There was another pause, longer this time. We're proud of you, Ashley. No matter what Madison says. Something warm blossomed in my chest. Thanks, Mom. I'll call you later. The city streets glistened as I hurried to my car, shoes clicking on the wet pavement. For a moment, I allowed myself to feel hopeful. Maybe, just maybe, tonight would be the end of an old chapter. I drove through downtown Dallas toward the courthouse, each block bringing me closer to the end of the story. The radio in my car buzzed with news of thunderstorms rolling through the Metroplex, but my mind was elsewhere, on the girls we'd lost, on the mothers who still waited for closure, on the promise I'd made to myself years ago, never let a monster go free if I could help it. As the courthouse came into view, lit up by the flashing lights of TV crews and police cars, I realized my hands were shaking. Not from fear, but from the weight of everything that had brought me to this moment. In just a few minutes, everything would change. For the families. For the city. Maybe even for me. The courthouse was a hive of activity, even this late in the evening. Blue and red lights pulsed across the rain-slicked street, camera crews gathered under tents, umbrellas forming a colorful patchwork in the humid Texas night. Reporters huddled around the marble steps, clutching microphones and notepads, their eyes scanning each car that pulled up. I parked in the staff lot, out of sight of the main entrance, and paused a moment behind the wheel. My hands had steadied, replaced now by a focused calm, a feeling I'd learned to trust over the years. It was the feeling I got before every big arrest, every risky warrant, every time I stepped into a situation that could go sideways in a heartbeat. Tonight, that feeling told me I was exactly where I was meant to be. Inside, the courthouse buzzed with tension. Security officers nodded as I walked past, their faces etched with exhaustion and relief. Everyone in this building knew what was at stake. For months, the Melvinson case had haunted every hallway and break room, consuming long weekends and family dinners, turning a team of weary detectives into a family bound by obsession and determination. Jackson was waiting for me by the elevators, rainwater dripping from his hair. "They're almost ready upstairs," he said, voice low. "Press is everywhere, but the DA wants you front and center. You good?" I smiled, a little tighter than usual. "I've been ready for this since we found the third victim." He nodded, pressing the elevator button. "Madison's still making things hard?" "Like clockwork," I replied. He grinned. "You know, you don't have to prove anything to her." I shrugged. "Maybe not. But tonight's about the victims. Not my family drama." The elevator doors slid open, and we rode in silence up to the 6th floor. The hallway outside the courtroom was filled with whispers and shifting feet. Lawyers, victim advocates, journalists, each carrying their own burdens, their own expectations. I caught a glimpse of Mrs. Vaughan, the mother of the first girl Melvinson hurt. Her eyes found mine, and in that split second, I felt all the late nights and heartbreak melt away. She nodded, silent gratitude radiating from her. The doors to the courtroom opened. The judge entered, followed by the jury, faces somber and pale. Melvinson sat at the defense table, his expression unreadable, hands folded on the table. I slid into my seat beside the lead prosecutor, heart thudding as the foreman stood. "We, the jury, find the defendant, Dennis Melvinson, guilty on all counts." The words echoed through the silent room like thunder. The prosecutor closed her eyes, relief flooding her face. Somewhere behind me, a mother sobbed. Melvinson's lawyer slumped in his chair, defeated. For a few seconds, the world went quiet, just the sound of rain against tall windows and the soft, shaking breaths of those who had waited too long for justice. Then came a swell of whispers, cameras clicking, reporters rushing from the room. The judge spoke, her voice firm and clear. "His sentencing will proceed immediately." I barely heard the rest. My mind was moving in 100 directions at once. What would I say at the press conference? Would Madison see the headlines? Would my colleagues finally get the credit they deserved? The bailiffs led Melvinson away, and I felt a strange mixture of triumph and exhaustion. Justice had been done, but the scars of the case would linger. On me, on the families, on the city itself. Jackson clapped me on the shoulder. "We did it, Ash." I nodded, unable to find words. As we filed out into the hall, a tidal wave of reporters surged forward. Microphones thrust in my face, camera lights blinding after the dark courtroom. "Detective Reed, how did it feel to hear the verdict? Do you believe justice was served? What would you say to the families watching tonight?" I straightened my back, felt the weight of my badge, and remembered every tearful interview, every cold case file. I'd say that tonight, 6 families finally have an answer. Justice isn't about erasing pain, but about making sure the guilty are held accountable. And tonight, we kept that promise. A murmur of approval rippled through the crowd. Questions flew, each more pressing than the last. I gave brief, careful answers. I wasn't here for headlines or glory. I was here for closure. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw my captain standing back. Arms folded, a proud smile barely hidden. He nodded once as I caught his gaze, a silent "well done" that meant more than any headline. Finally, as the crowd began to thin, my phone buzzed again. This time it was a message from Madison. "Just saw the news. Guess you were working after all. Call me." I didn't reply, not yet. There would be time for family later. Tonight, I wanted to breathe. To walk out into the rain and feel, for the first time in a long while, like I truly made a difference. I didn't go home that night. After the press conference, I lingered in my office, watching the storm pass through downtown Dallas. Files and evidence bags still cluttered my desk, a silent testimony to the months of work that had finally paid off. Every so often, my phone would buzz with texts, congratulations from colleagues, questions from reporters, a dozen unread messages from Madison. I left them all unanswered. For the first time in months, I allowed myself to do nothing. I sat back in my chair, shoes kicked off, rain tapping gently against the office window. I felt weightless, yet somehow heavier than ever, as if the relief and exhaustion had fused into something new, a quiet, bittersweet pride. I wanted to call my mom, to hear her voice, to tell her that I'd kept my promise to those families. But it was late, and I knew she'd be sleeping. A knock at my door startled me. Jackson poked his head in, still in his suit from court, hair mussed from the rain. He held 2 cups of coffee, burnt, stale, but hot. "Didn't think you'd be able to sleep," he said, dropping 1 cup on my desk. "Not a chance." He sat across from me, silence settling between us as comfortably as an old blanket. There was no need for words. We'd been through enough together to understand the things that didn't need saying. After a while, Jackson broke the quiet. "You know, you could take a day off. Go fishing, see a movie, call your sister back." I snorted. "Fishing? Is that what you do after a night like this?" He grinned. "Absolutely. Or maybe I'd just go home and sleep for a week. We both laughed, tension breaking at last. But his words lingered. Call your sister back. I picked up my phone, scrolling through Madison's texts. Most were predictable, first defensive, then surprised, then borderline apologetic. I almost didn't want to read them, but curiosity got the better of me. Ashley, I saw you on TV. I had no idea you were leading that case. Can we talk? I'm sorry for what I said at the wedding. I didn't know. There it was. That old family dynamic. She said what she wanted, then, when the truth came out, tried to rewrite the script. I knew she meant well, in her own way. Madison had always equated love with achievement, attention with affection. Maybe she'd been threatened by the fact that I'd built a life so different from hers, that I'd chosen a road she never understood. I stared at her last message. Can we talk? My thumb hovered over the screen. I wanted to say yes, to let her know I didn't hold a grudge, but something held me back. It wasn't about forgiveness, it was about letting myself take up space, letting my story be heard on my own terms, not as Madison's footnote. I set the phone aside and turned to Jackson. Do you ever feel like your family sees a version of you that isn't real? He nodded. All the time. My brother still thinks I'm the screw-up who got kicked out of college. I smiled, the ache in my chest easing a little. It's like they pick a story and never let you change the ending. Maybe it's up to us to write our own endings, he said quietly. We talked for another hour, about families, about old wounds, about the parts of our lives we never showed the world. When Jackson finally left, I stayed a while longer, watching the first streaks of sunrise chase away the night. Eventually, I gathered my things and stepped outside, letting the early morning air clear my head. The city was waking up, buses rumbling down wet streets, joggers braving puddles, bakeries filling the air with the scent of bread and cinnamon. I breathed it in, grateful for the ordinary beauty of a new day. On the drive home, I replayed the last 24 hours in my mind. The verdict. The press. Madison's words at the wedding. For the first time, I felt a shift inside myself, not defiance, not resentment, but a sense of peace. Maybe my job was never about proving Madison wrong. Maybe it was about proving to myself that I was enough, no matter what anyone else believed. When I reached my apartment, sunlight streamed through the windows, lighting up the mess I'd left behind. Half-empty coffee mugs, stacks of folders, a wilted plant I kept forgetting to water. It wasn't glamorous, but it was mine. Before I showered and changed, I sat down at the kitchen table, staring at the city skyline. I opened my phone, hesitated, then finally typed a reply to Madison. I'm tired, Maddie. Can we talk tomorrow? She answered almost instantly. Of course. I'll call after work. I'm proud of you, Ash. I set the phone down and allowed myself a small, genuine smile. Maybe, after everything, we were finally ready to talk, not as rivals or disappointments, but as sisters. When I finally woke up that afternoon, the world felt lighter. The ache in my shoulders had faded, replaced by a quiet clarity. I showered, changed into my favorite jeans and an old t-shirt from my academy days, then made myself coffee, real coffee, not the bitter stuff from a station. Sunlight streamed across my kitchen, illuminating the stacks of case files and post-it notes I'd scrawled late at night. For once, I didn't mind the mess. I glanced at my phone and saw a text from Madison. Still good for that call? Let me know when you're ready. I smiled despite myself. She sounded nervous, almost apologetic. Maybe last night had rattled her more than I thought. Before calling her back, I sat by the window and watched the city come alive. Across the street, a woman in scrubs walked her dog before her shift. Two kids zipped past on bikes, their laughter echoing up the block. For years, I'd tried to measure my life against other people's milestones, marriages, promotions, perfect holiday cards. But this morning, those things felt distant, almost irrelevant. I had my purpose. I'd made a difference. I dialed Madison's number, bracing myself for the awkwardness that usually followed our arguments. She answered on the second ring. Ashley? Hey, Maddie. A pause, then a rush of words. Listen, about the wedding, I shouldn't have. It's fine, I said gently, cutting her off. Really? You've said enough. Let's talk about something else. She exhaled, relief obvious even over the phone. Okay. Well, first of all, congratulations. I saw the news coverage. You looked so confident. I didn't know you were leading that kind of investigation. It's not exactly something you bring up over cake and champagne, I teased. She laughed, a genuine, embarrassed sound. Fair point. There was a long silence, the kind that used to feel unbearable between us but now just felt honest. I was jealous, you know, Madison admitted. You found something that mattered. I was too busy climbing ladders and worrying about appearances. I never thought. You never thought I'd make it, I finished for her, but without bitterness. No, I didn't. And that was my problem, not yours. I'm sorry, Ash. I closed my eyes, letting her words settle. For so long, I'd carried the weight of her expectations, letting them define me. Now, it was like letting go of a heavy coat in the Texas summer. Suddenly, I could breathe again. It's all right, I replied. We're just different people, Maddie. That doesn't mean either of us failed. We talked for nearly an hour. About the case, about her kids, about Mom's latest attempts to organize a family reunion. For the first time in years, our conversation felt easy. We joked about our childhood, how Madison once made me wear her pageant crown for a week as a dare, how I'd stolen her car keys and driven to the Dairy Queen at 16. Remember when you crashed Dad's lawnmower into the pool? Oh God, don't remind me. I'm still not allowed to mow anything. We both laughed, and for a moment, we were just sisters again, not lawyer and cop, not rival overachievers, but two women who shared a past and, maybe now, a future that could include forgiveness. When we finally hung up, I felt something shift inside me, a loosening of old wounds, a willingness to move forward. I wasn't naive. Madison would always be a little competitive, a little sharp. But maybe now she'd also see me clearly. My phone buzzed again, this time with a message from Jackson. You coming in for the debrief? I checked the time and realized the day had gotten away from me. On my way, I replied, grabbing my badge and keys. As I stepped out into the sun, I felt ready for whatever came next. The trial was over, but the city still needed protecting, and I was still Ashley Reed, daughter, sister, detective. At the station, the mood was lighter than I'd seen in months. Officers laughed in the break room, trading stories from last night's victory. The chief even brought in donuts. Actual, fresh donuts, not the rock-hard leftovers we usually endured. Jackson met me by the coffee machine, his face brighter than usual. "Looks like you slept." "Like a rock." He handed me a file. "You ready for the next storm?" I grinned. "Always." But before we dove into new cases, the chief called the team into the briefing room. He stood at the front, hands in his pockets, a rare smile on his face. "I just want to say how proud I am," he began. "Not just of the outcome, but of how you all stuck together. Detective Reed, you led the charge. The city owes you a debt." Applause broke out, genuine, warm, not just the polite kind you give at awards banquets. I felt my cheeks flush, but I didn't shy away from the attention. I'd earned this. After the meeting, Jackson nudged me. "Think Madison saw that on the news?" "I hope so." I laughed. "Maybe next time she'll just say I work in law enforcement." We walked out together, ready to face whatever chaos Dallas would throw our way next. The next few days blurred together. Calls, paperwork, new cases cropping up as quickly as the old ones closed. Yet, everywhere I went, the atmosphere felt changed. Even the city seemed different. People stopped me on the street to thank me, or waved when I walked into a coffee shop in uniform. For the first time in my career, I let myself enjoy the recognition. It wasn't about fame or glory. It was about knowing I'd done right by the victims and their families. Madison called a few more times that week, each conversation a little easier than the last. She sent photos of her kids' soccer games, asked for advice about a break-in near her office, even texted me a joke about lawyers and cops walking into a bar. Our relationship wasn't perfect. Old habits die hard, but it was honest. She seemed to finally accept that I wasn't interested in her version of success, and I stopped resenting her need to be the center of attention. At the precinct, life went on. The Melvinson case was closed, but new files landed on my desk: missing persons, domestic violence, a string of late-night robberies at convenience stores. The city didn't pause for long. But neither did I. One evening, as I was finishing paperwork, Jackson poked his head in. "Got plans tonight?" "Unless you count leftover takeout and laundry," I said, smiling. He grinned. "Come on. There's a little celebration for you at Lucky's. You deserve a night off." I hesitated. For so many years, I'd avoided gatherings, uncomfortable with attention, worried about letting my guard down. But tonight, something in me softened. "Yeah, I think I do deserve it." We met at Lucky's, a noisy, cheerful bar tucked between a tattoo parlor and a porn shop. Half the department was already there, plus some folks from the DA's office and a couple of firemen who owed me a favor from an old arson case. Someone handed me a beer, and Jackson made a toast, simple, heartfelt, no big speeches. "To Ashley. For sticking with it when nobody else would, and for proving you can't judge a book by its cover, especially if the cover is a Dallas PD badge and a tired smile." I laughed with everyone else, letting the warmth of the room fill me up. For the first time in ages, I felt like I truly belonged, not just as a detective, but as a person who had earned her place at the table. The night blurred by in stories and laughter. I found myself trading memories with a rookie who reminded me of myself 10 years ago, eager, idealistic, convinced she could change the world. I told her she could. I told her not to let anyone else define her value, not even her own family. As the night wound down, I stepped outside for a breath of air. The city buzzed around me, sirens in the distance, music from a passing car, the low hum of street lights. I checked my phone. Another text from Madison. Saw the news again. Proud doesn't even begin to cover it. Call me when you're free. I replied, someday I'll tell you the whole story over coffee. No microphones, no crowds. Just us. She sent a thumbs up emoji and a heart. Simple, but it felt like a small victory. On the way home, I rolled down my windows and let the night air wash over me. I thought about everything that had happened, the wounds, the victories, the truths finally spoken out loud. There was no going back to the old ways. And for once, I didn't want to. That weekend, Mom hosted a family dinner, and for the first time in years, I said yes without hesitation. When I arrived, the house was alive with noise, kids running, Dad on the grill, Madison bustling around the kitchen with Mom, as if no time had passed at all. She met me at the door with a tentative smile. Need help with anything? I asked. You could slice some tomatoes, Ishi replied. And try not to criticize my potato salad. We both laughed, and just like that, the tension melted away. Over dinner, we shared stories, good ones and hard ones. Madison talked about her cases, her kids, her plans for a beach trip. I told them a little about my work, not the gory details, just enough to make them see me, really see me, for who I was. Dad listened quietly, then finally said, we're proud of you, Ash. Always have been. Maybe we didn't say it enough. I swallowed the lump in my throat. Thanks, Dad. That means more than you know. Later, as I helped Madison clear the table, she nudged me. You know, you could have told me sooner what you really do. I wouldn't have been so hard on you. I looked at her, half amused, half exasperated. Would you have believed me? She grinned. Honestly? Probably not. But I'd like to think I'm learning. Maybe we both were. Monday came, and life quickly returned to its normal, busy rhythm. But even as I threw myself into the next round of cases, I felt changed in ways I hadn't expected. It wasn't just about closing Melvinson's file or finally earning my sister's respect. It was something deeper, a new, settled confidence that I didn't need anyone else's approval to measure my worth. That week, my captain called me into his office. Reed, there's a reporter from the Dallas Chronicle who wants to do a feature on the case and your work. You up for it? I hesitated, remembering all the years I'd avoided the spotlight. But then I thought of the families, how they'd fought for justice, how they deserved to see the system work for them. I'll do it, EI said. But only if it's about the team, not just me. The interview was scheduled for Friday afternoon at the station. The reporter, a young woman named Samantha, was sharp and compassionate. She asked about the investigation, but also about what it meant to be a woman in law enforcement, to face down stereotypes both in and out of uniform. People always assume they know your story, EI told her. Sometimes, they're wrong. Sometimes, you have to let your actions speak for themselves, and sometimes, you have to speak up and set the record straight. She nodded. Do you have any regrets? I thought of Madison, of the years we'd spent at odds. Only that I let someone else define my worth for so long. But I'm learning. We all are. After the interview, Samantha turned off her recorder and smiled. You know, detective, your story is going to help a lot of people, especially girls who don't see themselves as the hero. I smiled, thinking of the rookie at Lucky's, of every young woman who ever wondered if she was enough. That's all I could ever hope for. That evening, after a long shift, I finally found time to call Madison. We laughed about old family stories, swapped news about work, and made plans to meet for coffee that weekend. She admitted she'd read the online article twice, once for the facts, and again just to see my name in print. It was weird, she said. I've been in the paper for legal cases, but reading about my sister the detective? That hit different. I chuckled. Well, next time, maybe they'll write about your famous potato salad. Not unless they want to lose readers. For the first time in years, we slipped back into the easy teasing we'd shared as kids, before ambition and insecurity had wedged us apart. That Saturday, we met at a local cafe. No family, no work talk, just two sisters catching up. Madison asked about my new cases, and for once, she really listened, not just waiting to talk about herself. I told her about the rookie who reminded me of a younger me, about the joy and pain of making a difference in small ways. She reached across the table, her eyes soft. I'm glad you never gave up, Ash. Not on your work, and not on us. I smiled. I guess I just got tired of hiding. When we finished our coffee, Madison stood and pulled me into a quick, fierce hug. Don't be a stranger, she whispered. Promise? Promise. Back at the station, life moved on. There were new suspects to question, new leads to chase, new families to help. But now, every time I looked at my badge, I felt the full weight and privilege of what it meant. I was part of something bigger than myself, and I'd fought hard to be here. One evening, as I was finishing up paperwork, my captain came by. FBI's sending someone down to review the Melvinson file. Apparently, your work's made some waves in DC. I blinked, surprised. The FBI? He nodded. Seems like they want to pick your brain. Maybe see if you're interested in consulting on bigger cases. The thought sent a jolt of excitement and nerves through me. Was I ready for something new? Could I leave Dallas, my family, the city that had shaped me? I didn't have an answer yet, but for the first time, I felt open to the possibility. That night, I walked home through the quiet Dallas streets, replaying everything in my mind. The hard years, the victories, the lessons I'd learned about resilience, forgiveness, and not letting anyone else define me. I thought about Madison, about my team, about the city I'd protected and the girl I'd once been, desperate to prove she mattered. I wasn't desperate anymore. I knew who I was. And no matter where my story went next, I was proud of how far I'd come.